Now, the next point that Mary Eagleton states is that she says that always when you look at the literary history, the critical attention always concentrated on male writers. So again, she states that it was during the second wave of feminism that women writers, they started demanding a status and recognition for themselves. Okay? They wanted to rewrite the history. History has always talked about the male conquerors, the male fighters, the great men in history. History has mostly silenced or just taken away the women's role in building countries, in building institutions, in building history as a whole. Okay, so the women writers, they started demanding a rewriting of history. So that is not a simple thing, that is not a simple task. From generations, we are used to the sort of history that the male writers were writing. We learned it, we imbibed all those things, everything. But now, the women writers, they started demanding that all those things have to be reframed from, or the female experience should also be incorporated. Okay, so that is something revolutionary, something very challenging as well. So this was a very challenging task. And so Mary Eagleton, she says that women themselves, they had to fight for it. They had to support each other. They had to encourage each other for doing this. Because rewriting history from a female point of view, or incorporating the female experience, completely dismantling all those structures, that was not a simple task. And that was sometimes not welcomed, sometimes very threatening as well. They had to endure many oppositions from the menfolk, but they stood to the ground. She's talking about the writers who of the second wave of feminism who stood for this, who fought for this. Okay, so they tried to expand the area of women's writing, and they also established feminist publishing houses, because many publishers who were men, they were not ready to publish such works, such challenging works. So women had to establish feminist publishing houses. And with that, you see that during this second wave of feminism, an extensive new area of literature was coming up, was emerging, and that was called women's writing. So all those neglected or ignored women writers of the past, all those new budding writers, all the rewritten aspects of history, everything came as a whole to the literary arena, to the world of literature. So, and many of these books came to be prescribed in as part of curriculum as well. So, when a teacher teaches literary history, especially of the 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th centuries, we find that there is no reference to women writers. When we talk about especially English literature, because you are familiar with that, when we talk about literary history of English literature, we have seen that during these centuries we have no references about women writers. But with the coming of the second wave of feminism, these writers, these feminist activists, they explored all those old as well as new writers. So you can no longer complain about what to say about a lack of material in women's writing. Okay, so she is talking about how this area of women's writing emerged. That was the bold stance taken by many activists, many feminist activists who claimed that we, or what it is to be female, that should be known to the public, and it should be described by the women themselves, not the men, by the women themselves. So it is this bold stance that led to the emergence of a very new and promising and challenging and competitive field of literature called women's writing. So Mary Eagleton cites the examples of two important feminist activists who have worked for all this. One is Ellen Moyers, Ellenmoyers, Ellen Moyers and Elaine Showalter. Both these are American feminist critics, and it is writers like them who have kindled the long lost or ignored area of women's writing. So that is the second point. Now the third point is that Mary Eagleton takes an instance that Elaine Showalter has once said. Elaine Showalter has said that in the context of women's writing, there are many holes and hiatuses, or many gaps or absences or disruptions. All these are the terms that Showalter uses. Holes and hiatuses or absences, gaps, disruptions. So Showalter says that in the field of women's writing, there are many holes and hiatuses, hiatus, hiatuses, absences, gaps and disruptions. Now what does this mean? She says that, for example, you take the case of William Shakespeare. Of course, he is a great dramatist. But during the time of Shakespeare, we have not read or studied about any other equally popular woman writer, right? So it is not that women did not know to write during that time, but it was purely because they were denied the space, they were not given recognition, they were ignored, because during that time everybody believed that women should be within the confines of the home. Her duty is to look after the family, bear children, do this, do that, etc. There were very defined roles for a woman. And then again, you look at the critical acclaim that Shakespeare enjoys even now. But then when you look at a woman writer, Showalter says that no woman writer ever enjoys continuous critical acclaim. Take the case of Shakespeare. He lived and wrote during the 16th century. He is very popular even in the 21st century. And all throughout the 17th, 18th, 19th and 20th century, Shakespeare has maintained that critical acclaim. But have you ever seen any writer, any woman writer who enjoys such a continuous critical acclaim? No. Okay, so Showalter says that. Not only Showalter, there is another a feminist writer who has the same opinion, and that is Germaine Greer. Germaine Greer, Germaine, Germaine Greer, Greer, Germaine Greer. Both of them, Elaine Showalter and Germaine Greer, both of them say that women writers tend to disappear more easily from literary history. That is a trend. We don't know exactly why. Even in the case of cinema, we can see that. See, you have, especially in Malayalam cinema, we take the example, this Mammootty, Mohanlal, all these actors, they are still on the roll. They are still in the canon. But what about the female, the female actors? Many have come, many have gone. Okay, they don't enjoy that continuous critical acclaim. The same is in the case of literature as well. Not only that, in any artistic medium you take, this is the case. Because this is something that she points out, which is a fact. And then another point that Elaine Showalter states is that in the case of women writers, or the content of a woman writer, the way in which a male writer and a female writer perceive the world is entirely different. Okay, Showalter states that the way, the perception of the world from the point of view of a male writer and a female writer is completely different. For example, when you explore the writings of male writers, they are mostly concerned with class, with race, with politics, all those things. Okay? But when you look at a female writer, she will be focusing more on the gender bias. Okay? The gender matters to her more than the cultural, social, political aspects. So this is yet another aspect that Showalter points out. This is also stated by Mary Eagleton in her introduction chapter. Now, after giving us a very general idea about the emergence, the struggles of women, or of the women writers, of women writing, Mary Eagleton moves to the next section, which is titled Who Belongs to the Female Tradition? And in this part, she poses several questions. She also points out some problems that prevail within women's writing. Now, at the beginning of this essay, I had said that it opens with a quote by Tilly Olson. And in that, she talks about the vast number of testimonies that emerged with the development of this area called women's writing. So in this testimony, you find the experiences of women themselves. But then again, here, Mary Eagleton points out that there is a problem in the representation of these experiences. Because within the context of women's writing, there is a problem that often pops up. And the problem is that the content of many of these books written by women, they often deal with a tradition, and this tradition displays a very narrow and homogeneous literary production. That means, Mary Eagleton states that within the context of this women's writing, many of the books that are published, they deal with they deal chiefly with the life of white, middle class, heterosexual women, especially living in England and America during the 19th and 20th centuries. Okay, this is a problem that she finds out. So who is represented in this female tradition? It is the life and experiences of white, middle class, heterosexual women, not homosexuals like lesbians, but it is the life of white, middle class, heterosexual women, especially living in England and America. It is their experiences, it is their ideologies that is mostly being represented in women's writing. So this is a problem that she finds out. And she says that this was a trend, especially in works produced in America during the 1970s. And she cites some examples as well. For example, Mary Ellman's Thinking About Women, Patricia Spack's The Female Imagination, Ellen Moyer's Literary Women, even Ellen Showalter's A Literature of Their Own. All these works, they focus on the white, middle class, heterosexual women living in England and America. And these authors, Mary Ellman, Patricia Spack, Ellen Moyers or Elaine Showalter, all these women are considered as the founding figures of feminist literary criticism. But even in their works, we find such a tradition, such an extensive and very narrow tradition of portraying white or representing white, middle class, heterosexual women in England and America. So that is a problem that Mary Eagleton points out. And she says that mostly within the texts of these authors, you find that lesbians, both black and white, as well as black women or women of color, are mostly ignored. So there is a criticism among lesbians, among lesbian blacks and whites, as well as among black women. അപ്പോൾ ഈ ലെസ്ബിയൻസ് ആയാലും ബ്ലാക്ക് വിമൻ ആയാലും അവരുടെ ഇടയിൽ തന്നെ അവരൊരു ക്രിറ്റിസിസം പറയുന്നുണ്ട്. എന്താണ്? മെയിൽസ് എങ്ങനെയാണോ ഫീമെയിൽ എക്സ്പീരിയൻസിനെ മിസ്റെപ്രസെൻറ്റ് ചെയ്തത് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഇഗ്നോർ ചെയ്തത്, ഇൻ ദ സെയിം വേ ദീസ് ഓതേഴ്സ് ലൈക്ക് മേരി എൽമാൻ, Elaine Showalter, Patricia Spack, Ellen Moyers, etc. These founding figures of female criticism, female literary movements, these writers have ignored our experiences എന്നൊരു ക്രിറ്റിസിസം ലെസ്ബിയൻസിൻ്റെ ഇടയിലും അതേപോലെ ബ്ലാക്ക് വിമൻ്റെ ഇടയിലും ഉണ്ട് എന്നാണ് മേരി ഈഗിൾട്ടൺ പറയുന്നത്. ജസ്റ്റ് ലൈക്ക് ദ മെയിൽ ഓതേഴ്സ് ഇഗ്നോർഡ് ഫീമെയിൽ എക്സ്പീരിയൻസ്, these female founding figures of literary criticism, they have ignored the experiences of lesbians and of women of color എന്ന് പറയുന്നു. So they say that this is actually a failure to recognize the difference. ആ ഒരു വ്യത്യാസം മനസ്സിലാക്കാൻ, അതായത് ലെസ്ബിയൻസ് അവരുടെ എക്സ്പീരിയൻസുകളും വിമൻ ഓഫ് കളർ അവരുടെ എക്സ്പീരിയൻസുകളും എല്ലാം വ്യത്യസ്തമാണ്, ഡിസ്റ്റിങ്ക്റ്റീവാണ് എന്ന് മനസ്സിലാക്കാൻ ആർക്ക് കഴിഞ്ഞില്ല. ഓൾ ദീസ് ഫീമെയിൽ ആക്ടിവിസ്റ്റ് ഹാവ് ഫെയിൽ ടു റെക്കഗ്നൈസ് ദാറ്റ് എന്നാണ് ലെസ്ബിയൻസിൻ്റെയും ബ്ലാക്ക് വിമൻ്റെയും ഇടയിലുള്ള ഒരു ക്രിറ്റിസിസം. And they say that these female activists or these female authors like Ellen Moyers or Elaine Showalter, they are considering a universal womanhood. They consider as if the experiences of all women are the same. But the lesbians and women of color, they claim that our experience is different because we cannot equate with the white stereotypes, the female stereotypes of white feminists like the southern belle, the angel in the house, the submissive wife, etc. So this cannot be generalized. Our experience is different, and we are again within the context of women's writing as well. We are mostly denied space for self-expression. So ഇങ്ങനെയുള്ള ലെസ്ബിയൻസ് ആയാലും ഈ ബ്ലാക്ക് വിമൻ ആയാലും ദേ ആർ ഫേസിങ് എ ഡബിൾ ജിയോപാഡി. ഒന്നെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ എന്താണ്, ദേ ആർ ഫീമെയിൽ എന്നുള്ളത്. രണ്ടെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ എന്താണ്, ദേ ആർ ഡിഫറെൻറ്റ് എന്നുള്ളത്. അതായത് ഇവരിൽ നിന്നും അവരെ വ്യത്യസ്തമായിട്ടാണ്, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അവരെ ഇഗ്നോർ ചെയ്യാണ്. അവരെ മെന്നിൻ്റെ ഭാഗത്തു നിന്നും അവർക്ക് ഒരു സപ്രഷനുണ്ട്. അതേപോലെ തന്നെ ഈ വൈറ്റ് ഫീമെയിൽ സിൻ്റെ ഭാഗത്തു നിന്നും അവർക്കൊരു സപ്രഷനുണ്ട്. ദേ ഡോണ്ട് കൺസിഡർ ദെം ആസ് ഈക്വൽ ഓർ ദേ ആർ ഇഗ്നോർഡ് മെയിൻ സ്ട്രീം representation. But again, Mary Eagleton points out that there are writers who have talked for lesbians, who have represented the viewpoints of lesbians as well as black women. For example, there is Bonnie Zimmerman, Bonnie Zimmerman, Bonnie Zimmerman, Adrienne Rich, Alice Walker. All these writers have talked in favor of or represented the experiences of lesbians, of women of color, etc. And also another important example is Tillie Olsen. Tillie Olsen is also an honorable exception because she has always worked for the working class women, the women of color, and even Adrienne Rich and Bonnie Zimmerman, they have worked for lesbians and they have come up with many promising stances in favor of lesbians, etc. And then you also have in England the Marxist Feminist Literature Collective. That is yet another organization that has attempted to talk about class differences or such lesbian, their representation, their experiences, perceptions, etc. So this is something that Mary Eagleton points out in the second part of the introduction chapter of her essay, of her text.